Hi, I'm Parneet Jaggi, and this is going to be a series of lectures on the famous novel Mrs. Dalloway, written by Virginia Woolf. So, before we proceed to the details of the novel, let's know a little bit about who Virginia Woolf is. We know Virginia Woolf is a great psychological writer who is known for her stream of consciousness technique through her writings. And Mrs. Dalloway is one of the most successful, most popular, and well known novels of her times. So, Mrs. Dalloway is a novel, was published on 14th of May 1925, and basically it was created from two short stories written by her. One, Mrs. Dalloway in Bond Street, and the other was an unfinished short story entitled The Prime Minister. And so much so, the popularity of this novel can be measured by the fact that in 2005, Mrs. Dalloway was included on Time's list of the 100 best English language novels written since this magazine, The Time, debuted in 1923. And then we have more facets and more laurels to this novel, that it was made into a film by the Dutch director Marleen Goris in 1997. And it was adapted from Woolf's novel by British actress Aileen Atkins. And it went well. So we see in Mrs. Dalloway, Woolf is although using a stream of consciousness technique, but still the lack of events or the lack of a racy plot does not lead to its failure. Now let's check what is stream of consciousness and what is she trying to do in this novel as an experiment. Now here in Mrs. Dalloway, Virginia Woolf uses stream of consciousness to actually enter the minds of her characters and portray the cultural and individual change in that specific period that followed the First World War. Now, it can be beautifully compared to James Joyce's famous work Ulysses. Like Ulysses, Virginia Woolf's novel is also set on a single day in a city in the middle of the month of June. And Woolf actually was reading and rereading Ulysses when she began writing this book. And because she was a contemporary of Joyce, so she kind of had an influence of his work, his techniques, but we have a very prominent difference in both the works. Unlike Joyce's characters, this character, Mrs. Dalloway, Clarissa Dalloway, is actually not mythologized like in James Joyce. And she has not been uplifted or compared to a classical epic. In fact, on the contrary, Mrs. Dalloway as a character is an ordinary woman of her time, defined in terms of her husband and her identity submerged in his identity. Even her first name has been erased by the social signature that she carries with her identity. So we see that the method Woolf uses here, the representation of the stream of consciousness, actually reflected her own need to go beyond the, we can say, the clumsiness of the factual realism which was shown in the novels of her precursors and also contemporary writers. So this was a kind of a psychoanalysis she did with a woman character to uncover a multi-layered self in which the dreams and memories and fantasies of females were shown as important as their actions and thoughts. Now, before we proceed with the main story, plot, the themes and other details of the novel, it's imperative to know the main characters of the novel. So the first prominent character, the protagonist of the novel, is Clarissa Dalloway, whom we know as Mrs. Dalloway. So the novel begins with Clarissa's point of view and follows her perspective more closely than that of any other character. Like we see, she prepares for the party which she is going to give that evening. She's throwing a party that evening in which the novel opens. We are kind of not very open to her thoughts. Her thoughts are meandering here and there, working, moving, and we are not very familiar with her thoughts. Clarissa is vivacious and cares a great deal about what other people think of her, but she is also self reflective. She often questions life's true meaning, wondering whether happiness is truly possible. So we have bouts of reflection and contemplation in the novel itself when she is thinking about concepts like happiness, life, purpose, meaning, relationships, and the stuff. And she feels both a great joy and also a dread about her life, both of which manifest in her struggles, and they strike a balance between her desire for privacy and also her need to communicate in the society. Now, throughout that particular day, when we see the novel opening, Clarissa reflects on that crucial summer day when she chose to marry her husband Richard instead of her friend Peter Walsh, whom she liked. Now, though she feels that she's happy with Richard, although she's not entirely sure or certain whether she made the wrong choice about Peter, and she also keeps thinking frequently about her friend Sally Seton, whom also she loved, and we'll talk about these characters. Then we have Septimus Warren Smith. Now, this Smith is a World War I veteran suffering from shell shock. He is married to an Italian woman by the name of Lucrezia. And he looks insane a bit, and he views English society in much the same way as Clarissa does. And as he struggles, just as Clarissa also struggles to maintain his privacy and also his desire to communicate in the society, so in the process he shares lots of traits with Clarissa. So we identify him as a kind of a duplicate character to Clarissa. While we look at his physical appearance, he is pale, he has a hawk-like posture, wears a shabby, dirty overcoat. Before the war, he was young, idealistic, an aspiring poet. After the war, he regards human nature as evil and believes he is guilty of not being able to feel. So, we see the change of perspective during the World War in which he has been an active participant, and rather than succumb to the society that he abhors, he dislikes, he actually commits suicide. Then we have another important character, Peter Walsh. Now, he is a close friend of Clarissa, once desperately in love with her. And Clarissa rejected Peter's marriage proposal when she was 18, and he moved to India. Now he has not been to London for 5 years. Now, what kind of a person we find in Peter Walsh? He is highly critical of others. He is conflicted about almost everything in life. And he has a habit of playing with his pocket knife all the time in his hand. And he's often seen overcome by emotion very easily, and he starts crying also. He has had frequently romantic problems with women, and we see that while the action of the novel is going on, he's currently in love with a married woman in India named Daisy. And specifically to look at, he wears glasses which are horn-rimmed glasses and a bow tie, and he was like earlier a socialist also. Then we have another close friend of Clarissa and Peter in their youth by the name of Sally Seton. Sally was a wild, handsome ragamuffin who smoked cigars and would say anything. Now, ragamuffin is a typical word actually which is used for cats, wild cats. So she has been kind of symbolically compared to a cat who is wild, rough, although good looking, but most of the time rash and crude, smoking cigars and could say anything out of her mouth. And she was very, very close to Clarissa while they were teenagers. Now she lives in Manchester and is married, has 5 boys, and now her name is Lady Rosetta. Then we have Richard Dalloway, another important character, of course, because he is Clarissa's husband. He is a member of parliament in the Conservative government. He plans to write a history of the great English military family, the Brutons, when the Labour Party comes to power. So he is a typical politician, he is also a sportsman and likes being in the country. But when we look at the family structure and his relationship with his wife and family, we find that he is a loving father and husband. While he is devoted to social reform, he appreciates English tradition also. So the next character we have in our platter is Hugh Whitbread. Now this is another old friend of Clarissa who is married to Evelyn Whitbread. He is an impeccable Englishman, an upholder of English tradition, and he writes letters to the Times about various causes. So impeccable means we find him a kind of a perfect gentleman with good manners and a very good personality and proper traditional English gentleman. He is, as Clarissa thinks, almost too perfectly dressed. So now he's one character actually who makes Clarissa feel very young and insecure also, because he himself is so immaculately dressed up perfectly like a gentleman. Then we have Lucrezia Smith, also named Rezia, who is actually Septimus's wife. She is a 24-year-old hat maker from Milan. She loves Septimus but is forced to bear the burden of his mental illness alone. Normally, she has been a very lively and playful young woman, but now, because of the worries and burdens she has been carrying, she has grown thin. She feels isolated and continually wishes to share her sorrow and gloom with somebody. Then we have this child, the girl of Clarissa and Richard, by the name of Elizabeth Dalloway. She is the daughter of Clarissa. She's gentle, she's considerate, somewhat passive, reticent, 17-year-old. Elizabeth does not have the same kind of energy that Clarissa has. She has a dark beauty which is now beginning to attract the attention of others. She's not actually a fan of parties or clothes, but she likes to be by herself in the country with her father and her dogs. She spends a great deal of time praying with her history teacher, the religious Miss Kilman, and is considering looking into her career options for her future. Now, apart from these characters, we also have some more characters. We may call them minor characters, like the history teacher of Elizabeth, who is actually a German, Doris Kilman. Then we have Sir William Bradshaw. He is a renowned London psychiatrist. When Lucrezia seeks help for her insane husband Septimus, Septimus's doctor, Dr. Holmes, recommends Sir William Bradshaw. So, and this person believes that most people who think they are mad suffer instead from a lack of proportion, and he determines that Septimus had suffered a complete nervous breakdown, and he recommends that he should spend some time in the country. And he's a respectable name in his medical field. Then we have Dr. Holmes, who is the general practitioner of Septimus. Then we have Lady Bruton. She is a member of high society and a friend of the Dalloways. She's 62 years old and she is devoted to promoting the emigration process to Canada for the English families. and so on. Then we have another character, Miss Helena Parry. She is Clarissa's aunt, and she is a kind of a character who is a relic of a remain of the strict English society, which Clarissa finds so confining and limiting. She's also a botanist, and she keeps talking about orchids and all that stuff. Then we have some more characters like Ellie Henderson, Evans, Mrs. Filmer, Daisy Simons, Evelyn Whitbread, Mr. Brewer, and so on, which we may talk or mention them in the plot overview in the next lecture. So this was a brief study, a brief introduction to the characters that we're going to meet in Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. Thank you for now.